This is number 14 on the exam 3 review. So we have a list of test scores for a class of 20 students. So we can see that they are already in order from least to greatest. So that saves us a little bit of time. And we're asked to find a few things on here. The first is the minimum or the lowest value. So that would be 5. Then we have our maximum value, which would be 100. Then next we're asked to find the quartiles. So we generally think of these as Q1. The second quartile is just the median. You can also call it Q2. And then our third quartile is Q3. So you really have to find the median first. So since there's 20 scores, we need 10 on either side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And just to check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right, so this is our median or our Q2. Normally I average those numbers together to get the number in the middle, but since they're both 77, I know the average would be 77. All right, so notice that was Q2. I have to get that first, so then I take these 10 scores and I find the middle of those. So I want to go 5 on either side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be Q1. So Q1 is going to be halfway between 63 and 67. So if we average those together, think of the number halfway between those and it should be 65. All right, now I'm going to find Q3. So I want the middle of the top half of the data. There's 10 scores, so I count out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here's Q3. It's going to be halfway between 85 and 86. Okay, so halfway between 85 and 86 would be 85.5. Now the 5-number summary we haven't talked about as much. Let me go ahead and give you that. You start with the minimum. Then you list your quartiles in order. So 65, 77, 85.5, and then you write down the max. So it's the min, Q1, Q2, which is the median, Q3, and the max. The reason sometimes we put these numbers together is because these are the 5 numbers we're going to use for the box plot. So we'll keep an eye on this. We'll come back to this one in a minute. Next we have interquartile range, that is Q3 minus Q1. So Q3 was 85.5, Q1 was 65, and that comes out to be 20.5. All right, next we want to calculate the lower and upper limit. The lower limit is Q1 minus 1.5 times the IQR. So Q1 was 65 minus 1.5 times 20.5. So if I put that in my calculator, that comes out to be 34.25. Now the upper limit is Q3, but then there's a plus 1.5 times the IQR. So the lower limit is looking at the lower whisker to the left, so we subtract. The upper limit's looking at the upper whisker, so it starts at Q3 and goes up. So that's why we add on that one. So that would be 85.5 plus 1.5 times 20.5. If you put all of that in your calculator, it comes out to be 116.25. So to get outliers, to figure out our outliers, we look at our lower and upper limits. Anything lower than the lower limit or higher than the upper limit is considered an outlier. Now we don't have any test scores higher than 116, they max out at 100, but I do have a score that's lower than 34.25, and that's going to be this one right here. So you can kind of see there's a pretty good jump. Right, you have all these scores that are kind of evenly spaced out, and then the 5, it is a little bit uncommon, right, a little bit lower than all the others, so that's going to be our possible outlier. All right, so now I want to make my box plot. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these 5 numbers. So I'm going to start with the minimum, so it looks like, if it makes you feel better, you can mark your number line here. It might make me feel a little bit better. Make it a little easier to see. So the 5 is going to be halfway between the 0 and the 10. So that's my minimum. My maximum's 100, so I'm going to put a mark on the 100 as well. All right, now I'm going to do my quartiles. My first one is 65, so that'll be halfway between the 60 and the 70. Then I've got 85.5, so 85 is about right here. And then, oh, I skipped Q2. Q2 is in the middle, that's 77, that would be about right here. All right, so your 3 quartiles, that makes your box. And it doesn't really matter how, I guess, fat you make it, how big the lines are, but that's going to be your box. And then these are your whiskers. This is not going to be my straightest line ever, but that's okay. So you can see on this, you've got a really long whisker. So sort of the idea behind the upper and lower limit is you take the length of the box. If you go out the length of the box and then another half, that would be somewhere around here. Anything below that should be an outlier. So your whisker should not be more than 1.5 times your box. So now we're going to do a modified box plot. On the modified box plot, we're going to take out the outlier. Now it's not going to disappear. Let me do my marks again. All right, so where the 5 is, I'm just going to put a star, and that indicates an outlier. And then I need to go all the way back up to my numbers and find my next smallest. So my next smallest score is 58. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to make my new minimum 58. So I'm going to put a line right about there. Now everything else stays the same. The box is still going to be, let's see, 65 would be about here. 77 would be about here. 85.5 would be about here. So if you'll notice, your box should be identical to the one above it. All right, now I kind of hand drew that, so it's not perfect. But you can see the boxes match. But notice how much shorter this whisker is. Okay, that's because I took out the outlier, and I can see there's no scores between 5 and 58. Now I didn't have an outlier on the upper limit, so that stays 100, and that whisker stays exactly the same. All right, so there's your box plot and then your modified box plot.